Hey guys, my name is Cicabeot1. If you're a Midwesterner like me and you've ever wondered what the culture and music is like on the west side of the coast, well, have I got the game for you. Welcome to the third part of my ongoing series reviewing the soundtracks to the Tony Hawk video game franchise. Part 1 was Pro Skater, Part 2 was Underground, and Part 3 is an all-California open-world extravaganza. Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. In some ways, this could easily be considered Underground 3 for the series, and as such, I originally intended to talk about this game's soundtrack alongside the official Underground games, but that video ended up being 110 minutes long without Wasteland, so probably best that I waited. No sex before marriage and no Wasteland before Underground. I think that's how the saying goes. This entry tried to further innovate on the formula with a pseudo-open-world design and all sorts of new weird moves and features, but we don't care about any of that for this video. Instead, we're here to talk about the licensed soundtrack this beast was loaded up with. After all, the Tony Hawk games have a legacy for great licensed soundtracks, and it's worth exploring if 7 games in, that standard of quality is still kept up. And I will say up front that the music of this game has a very different feel compared to past entries. The game's aesthetic is very glitzy yet grungy due to taking place near Hollywood and Los Angeles. The image that comes to mind before anything else when it comes to this game for me is a pink star, since that's something you see often in the interface. And the music matches that with a renewed emphasis on punk and broader focus on electronic and even a little bit of new wave. There's still your metal and hip-hop tracks, but in a nutshell, that's what you're getting from the music of American Wasteland, and I still think there's a lot to like about it. It has something for everyone, 8.5 out of 10. Like my previous videos, we're going to look at every track in this game individually, some in depth, some at a glance, but all 63 songs in this game will be discussed one way or another. We'll be playing the GameCube version simply because that's what I own, but we also have a DS version this time around, American Skateland, featuring licensed songs from the main game. But it's only 13 songs, and some of them aren't played in their entirety. Yeah, from here on out, we're using a little bit of DS footage in these retrospectives. I've touched on the GBA entries mostly having original soundtracks with one exception, but now we're at the point where the portable entries can feature a good chunk of songs and decent quality for the system. In fact, I associate some of these songs more with Skateland than I do with Wasteland, if that makes any sense. Definitely don't sleep on this version of the game, because I think it has some triumphs over the console version. You can sleep on the GBA version of Skateland, though. I've beaten it, it's not good. But I'm bringing it up here because, interestingly, this has some GBA-ified remakes of some of the songs on the soundtrack. You'll be skating around and go, oh hey, that's California Uber Alleys, that's Watch It Fall, that's Filthy Gorgeous, etc. They're mostly loose approximations, but they sound pretty good for the system, and are a huge step up over Underground 2 bit-crushing a handful of real songs. But I see no reason to use more than this little bit of footage for this video. Sorry if that's a lot of information to take in all at once. I'm a nerd when it comes to this series. It's what I do. So let's actually get this journey started. Like the Underground games, songs are split into 3 genres: punk, hip-hop, and rock and other. And we're gonna start with the punk songs, of which there are many. Again, the punk here seems to have a flashier tone than that of previous entries. Not by a whole lot, it's not selling out or anything, but in some cases it gives me an 80s California feel, if I could oversimplify things. But interestingly, we have a set of covers made specifically for this game, released on a compilation album whose cover tributes The Clash, even though there's no Clash songs in this game, covered or otherwise. These are, at the time, up-and-coming punk and emo bands putting their spin on older punk classics and deep cuts. At least I assume they're classics. I only really recognized, like, 4 of these songs before I played this game. I think it's most appropriate that we start here, because this almost feels like a centerpiece of the soundtrack. Also because then I can technically say this video is an album review. The series would never do this again, but I do think it's kinda neat, celebrating the music some of these bands might have grown up with, while giving this game some exclusive tunes to blast while skating through the vacant tunnels that awkwardly tie this world together. First, let's exploit the working class with From Autumn to Ashes covering Let's Have a War by Fear. We previously heard Fear with I Love Livin' in the City and Underground 2, and like that song, this is a political satire, with the narrator sounding like a raving lunatic repeating "there's so many of us," and listing off all the selfish reasons governments go to war. And From Autumn to Ashes turns this into a post-hardcore screamo song, and this is the version I prefer for a couple reasons. One, I think the screamed vocals are really well done and intense. The original honestly feels a bit campy, even if the satire is spot on. It just has a much bigger impact with the stronger crunch of the guitars and the singer's growled vocals. Damn, that feels good. The other reason I prefer this version is this line. This line was "give guns to the queers" in the original. Not hard to see why this needed to be changed, that's just yikes. Although I do appreciate that Fata was willing to switch it up to a more acceptable target in 2005. Screamo doesn't usually do it for me, but this hit the nail on the head and made this an excellent version of this song. And as for a cover where this approach didn't work nearly as well, here's Census Fail covering Institutionalized. Sometimes I try to do things, and it just doesn't work out the way I want it to. Institutionalized by Suicidal Tendencies is an incredible punk song. A schizophrenic masterclass of free-flowing, incoherent thoughts that paint a picture of a teenager losing his sanity and temper at the drop of a hat. All with intricate guitar solos that play over the verses and that blend together exceptionally well. This song has been used in 3 games published by Activision: Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX 2, Guitar Hero 2, and Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. The problem is that none of these games ever used the original version. Matt Hoffman used a re-recording by Suicidal Tendencies, Guitar Hero 2 used a cover by Wave Group, and American Wasteland uses a cover by Census Fail. The problem with that is that I think this song might be nearly uncoverable. This song depends on a very specific rhythm of the vocals, one that doesn't sound rehearsed, but can still match the instrumentation. Wave Group did it pretty well, but Census Fail tried to add their own flair to it and make it stand out, and I'm not just talking the instrumentation. I do think the guitars and drums are appropriately chaotic and crunchy, but the lead singer Buddy is clearly trying to throw in his own inflections and rhythm to the lyrics, and it just feels too labored and rehearsed. And they go, well, if you want to talk about it, I'll be here, and you'll probably feel a lot better if you talk about it. The illusion that he's losing his mind is pretty much lost here. This is a performance, and not a very convincing one. The screamo chorus is fine, but the awkward pauses and the rant about wanting Pepsi and whatnot make the verses a downgrade across the board. There's no reason to listen to this over the original. If you need a better version, I recommend the remake from Body Count, a rap metal band fronted by Ice-T. This one has completely original verses and has a central theme of anger management. It is hilarious and a much better alternative to this classic track if you're looking for one. I don't know why you would be, but I think you deserve to know that one exists. Just looking out for you. On to another song I'm familiar with. We've got Thursday covering the Buzzcocks classic Ever Fallen in Love, one that's been covered a fair few times all over history, including in 2004 by Pete Yorn for the Shrek 2 soundtrack. And Thursday's rendition is pretty spot on to the original, I'd say. It's more just a simple modernizing of a 70s tune, and it's pretty inoffensive in that regard. I already liked this song for how catchy and ironic it is, and this cover preserves that attitude pretty well. And that's kind of funny considering just how in your face Thursday is, but we'll save that for the Downhill Jam video cause one of their own songs is featured in that game. Search and Destroy, originally by Iggy Pop, covered for this game by Emmanuel. This is another song I'm already familiar with due to being used in Guitar Hero 2, and unfortunately, I'm not huge on this cover. It's okay, but the lead singer sounds pretty whiny to me. This is a song about being a badass killer, but this guy sounds like he's putting on a front, making this more like pop-punk cheese than the post-hardcore it's trying to be. For what it's worth, the guitars sound alright, though maybe they're a little too loud. It's an okay cover, and I just wish this was the original Iggy Pop version instead.
He was in the last game after all. They could have gotten him if they wanted to.
Speaking of songs and artists from Underground 2, we have the Dead Boys' Sonic Reducer. Yeah, a song used in the game from the previous year gets the cover treatment the very next year. To be fair, this was one of the songs I originally glanced over, so at least I won't be retreading too much. For Wasteland, we have a cover by Saves the Day, which does have a similar style to that of the Search and Destroy cover, namely the lead singer sounding like a bit of a brat. The opening line of this song is, "I don't need anyone, don't need no mom and dad," so this already wasn't a song I took all too seriously, and the narrator being some punk kid pissed off about being grounded or something, swearing he's gonna rule the world, totally tracks here. I don't prefer it to the original, but Saves the Day's take on this song does mostly work. I do still think it's weird that Activision double-dipped on this song so quickly, but they still managed to be different flavors that match different games. The gruffer, more destructive original for the mischievous Underground 2, and the glitzier, brattier cover for the LA-centered Wasteland.
So that was fun, right? Comparing all these covers to their original versions? Well, from here on out, I am much more familiar with the covers than I am with the originals. So there's gonna be a little less comparison for the rest of this. But don't worry, I still did my research.
Oddly enough, a couple of the covers from this game were actually medleys, combining two songs from their chosen artists instead of just one. With the first one, Taking Back Sunday combines two Descendants tunes, Suburban Home and I Like Food. The first song is your typical fast punk song, and from a legendary, genre-defining act, all about sarcastically yearning for a normal, white bread lifestyle. Actually, I don't know exactly how sarcastic this is supposed to be, mostly that it feels like the antithesis of what punk acts from the era were like. And the idea that the narrator actually desires that sort of normal lifestyle becomes even less believable when you turn it into a post-hardcore song. I want a house just like mom and dad isn't something you scream at the top of your lungs in earnest. Well, ironic or not, this slaps. It's one of the few hardcore covers here that doesn't feel too whiny, which I appreciate. And the cherry on top is ending this off with I Like Food, which itself was originally a less than 20-second track that's not even on the same album as Suburban Home. It's fast, it's jokey, it has nothing to do with the themes of the main event, but who cares? Let's eat. The other medley we have in this game is much less random. We have Thrice covering two Minor Threat songs, Seeing Red and Screaming at a Wall. To me, the reason for combining these songs is a little more obvious. They're short and basically the same song. But that's not really much of a problem. From what I understand, Minor Threat was a pioneering hardcore punk act, even inspiring the straight edge movement. Basically punks who swear off promiscuous sex, drugs, and whatnot.
Okay, maybe Suburban Home was less ironic than I thought it was, but I can respect that.
As for Thrice's take on them, they're definitely faithful, because the production quality here is very rough. This shocked me because I know some other Thrice songs. They even have one of their original songs in this game too, and they usually do not sound like this. Their sound is a lot more polished than this in the songs I'm familiar with, but to be fair, I think they kill it with this much rougher sound. Everything has a sinister echo, and the narrator feels like a messed up rage demon going crazy and lashing out in an empty room. Yeah, can't get much more hardcore punk than this, and your mileage may vary if that's a good thing or not. But for me, I'd say it is. Next, we have Rise Against performing Fix Me by Black Flag, a track that clocks in at less than 1 minute. This is funny for that reason, and also because it's very different from Rise Against's typical dramatic songs like Prayer of the Refugee. It's much more straightforward punk and less rhythmic and... Oh, the song's over. I mean, I didn't have much to say about it anyway, even though I do like it, but that's really all they wanted to do for this game? Well, alright. Next song then. Here's Dropkick Murphys covering Who Is Who by Adolescence, a band I previously knew for Amoeba in Pro Skater 3. Short song, so there's not much to say here. It's a little odd to hear the Murphys do something that isn't Irish punk, though I guess maybe they felt their respective singers sounded similar enough to justify this. I guess they wouldn't be wrong. They're awesome anyway, so this cover is still a lot of fun, despite how short it is. And to get one more short one out of the way, we have Hot Snakes covering Time to Escape by Government Issue. Two bands I've never heard of otherwise, and neither one gives me any huge surprises. The original has that rowdy 80s punk feel that a lot of the bands featured in these games embodied, and of course Hot Snakes provide a more modern feeling production that feels ripe to accompany you while you skitch behind a dog's tail through Beverly Hills. It's a good song, but what especially elevates Hot Snake's take on it is the bell passage in the outro. It's like a descent into madness, and pretty fitting considering the singer sounds like a raving lunatic for most of the song.
Nothing more punk than making yourself sound like those "the end is near" nut jobs wearing signs on the streets.
And finally, we're back to songs longer than 2 minutes, but not by much. House of Suffering, originally by Bad Brains, performed here by The Bled. The track's most notable feature is that it starts and ends with the most f***ing brutal snare roll I think I've ever heard in my life. I didn't think it was possible to hit a drum that hard without breaking it. I think this quality alone is why a post-hardcore band like The Bled wanted to cover this one, because otherwise, it's a pretty unexpected matchup. Their sound is characterized by screaming and blast beats, while this is a gothic punk song with no screaming at all. Think Misfits or Danzig, I guess. I find this version of The Bled a lot easier on my ears myself. Clearly, they don't have a vocalist who can do the kind of wacky inflections Bad Brains like to do, but it's a worthy cover anyway. The morbid imagery that fits their MO, and they can even substitute the breakdown for some throaty screaming to keep their fans happy. And speaking of Misfits, their song Astro Zombies gets the cover treatment for this game too. Now, who doesn't know the Misfits?
I'm actually not that familiar with them.
Well, too bad. And interestingly enough, the band that got to do this cover was none other than My Chemical Romance. This is still kind of impressive to me, considering this came out before the Black Parade. Though I'm sure they weren't complete unknowns at the time, they had singles like Helena and I'm Not Okay, I Promise under their belt from the previous year after all. Still, what an honor to get to cover a band like Misfits for this game, right? And it's another song where, knowing the artist, this feels a little outside of their typical style. MCR makes grand epics that border on being rock operas, while Astro Zombies is a quick and dirty punk song about killer aliens. This makes Mass Extinction sound like a jolly old time. I mean, it's still basically emo. The narrator's essentially a bratty kid who wants the world to pay for their crimes. It's just that it doesn't play up any brooding angst like MCR is known for. Plus, of course, their take is gonna have crunchier guitars with cleaner, more modern production. Par for the course for these covers in this game, really. It's not exactly a massive shift in mood for the song. Unlike our second to last cut from this cover album, Wash Away, originally by TSOL, or True Sounds of Liberty.
Yeah, I think I like it better as an acronym. Much less pretentious.
For the American Wasteland cover, we get Alkaline Trio, the band who previously gave us Armageddon from Underground 1. I barely talked about that song in the Underground video, so I guess this is my chance to pay my dues, cause this is a great cover. The original, ironically, I think suffers from trying to be too punk. The scratchy guitars and equally scratchy vocals make it sound like it's trying to be some of the other quick and dirty cuts that we've already talked about. Or maybe I feel that way because I listened to Alkaline Trio's cover a lot before hearing the original. Their take is a lot more pop-punk, with better produced guitars, and a singer who actually sounds like he's taking this seriously. It just lands a lot better when it's done sincerely, and I think the bridge is a good display of this. It's a spoken word breakdown, and for the most part, TSOL does it pretty well. The singer sounds fairly heartfelt and genuine, at least for a bit, but then it's accented by these really ugly gummy synths. That's a mood killer. Haha, nope, we were joking. Alkaline Trio play that bit with grand piano tones, and holy crap, this is a lot better.
Wash away. Wash away.
I probably shouldn't be ragging on the original too much. It's still fine. It's just that the Thaw cover is significantly better. Maybe that's bias speaking, but you went into this video knowing it was going to be opinionated and biased anyway, so who am I trying to kid?
But you know who else I get opinionated for? That's right, our final cover artist of the evening. So everybody, put your hands together for Fall Out Boy.
Yep, our favorite word salad edgelords, Fall Out Boy, get a crack at Start Today by Gorilla Biscuits. A song I deliberately saved for this moment because it's my favorite of the covers. And not like with Wash Away, where I think the cover is so much better, here each version is different enough to stand on their own and still work. Gorilla Biscuits with their bratty, snot-nosed blast of classic punk, and Fall Out Boy's more modern take, complete with Patrick Stump vocals. This was the year FOB broke through with Sugar We're Going Down, though I'm sure they got most of their cred to be part of this from their debut album Take This to Your Grave, especially since this cover is very similar stylistically to that record. Has a lot more punk edge than many of their hits they'd rack up in the following years, but you know, still emo. These lyrics work for both subcultures, a lazy punk who's put off bettering himself, but wanting to make steps towards that change. But there's two moments that especially stand out for me. First is the little bass riff that plays right before the first verse. As an amateur bassist, this is harder to imitate than it sounds, and second is the growled "start" right before the bridge. Gorilla Biscuits did this in roughly the same tone as the rest of the song, but here it's something to really kick things into gear. Just a wonderful song all around, and while I do prefer the Fall Out Boy version, and obviously so, the Gorilla Biscuits version is no slouch either. They stand out for different reasons. Most of the covers done for this game stuck fairly close to their respective originals, but this and a handful of others injected the band's own style and made something worthy of appearing in just the dumbest skateboard game imaginable at the time. Dumbest, of course, being said endearingly. Overall, I do think this was a pretty solid collection of covers. In-game, they absolutely nail the tone and setting of Tony Hawk's California, and in true Tony Hawk fashion, it introduced me to a lot of bands I hadn't heard of before. So yeah, mission accomplished.
And that's only half of the punk this game has to offer.
14 punk songs down, 15 to go. And I can't think of a better song to kick this category off than with the game's theme song, California Uber Alleys. California, Uber Alleys. This is Dead Kennedy's second appearance in Tony Hawk, after Police Truck featured as the opening song in the first game. So for them to get the same treatment for Thaw must be some kinda high honor. And it's still a biting satire, painting California Governor Jerry Brown as a fascist Nazi. All cause he's a hippie, apparently.
Yeah, hippies suck.
I have no political discussion I want to add to this song. I don't know anything about this guy, but I can appreciate how over-the-top the writing is, especially in the bridge that jumps straight to death camps for the quote-unquote uncool. Did Jello Biafra actually believe Brown would do this? Probably not, but it certainly gets your attention. Oh yeah, also this song slaps. This is a surf rock classic. The intro is great with its pounding drums and slick bass line, the tension's constantly ramping up to each chorus, Jello sounds outright evil with every line, almost like this is a villain song from a Disney movie, only with more genocide. Plus, this is faster than the version I'm more familiar with from Rock Band. It is the perfect pace for skateboarding, and I think it does a much better job at setting the tone for this game than Police Truck did for Thups 1, mostly because it didn't get overshadowed this time.
I mean, what's gonna overshadow it? 30 Day Wonder by Good Riddance? I don't think so.
Don't take that jab too seriously, I just needed a transition, alright? 30 Day Wonder is another really short thrash-off, but I love it. Though it actually starts off sounding kinda quaint. You get a few seconds of some simple riffs, including some really satisfying sounding echo, but once you get the fierce drum roll and the start of the vocals, it quickly becomes a damn rodeo. Yeah, these are the bread and butter for these games. Fast as hell, rebellious, and never let go once they've got you. Well, until this slows down again. But don't worry, the singer still sounds like a raving lunatic. There's not much to this one, but it definitely feels like California to me, as someone who's never been. But moving on to something with more defining features, it's Watch It Fall by the God-Awfuls. It's in a similar camp as the last song, incredibly fast with a rebellious spirit, but with two defining features. First is that monster of an opening guitar riff. This riff is so good that I think even the GBA version had a really great rendition. Listen. God bless the Vicarious Visions employees who had to work on the sound for this game that 3 people would ever play. Anyway, the second defining feature is that anthemic chorus. It's like everyone in the band suddenly joined a choir. It's great. For some reason, this feels kinda ambitious for a punk song. Or maybe it mostly feels that way compared to the usual tone punk songs in this series take. Not a lot sounds like California Uber Alleys, really.
But damn if the God-Awfuls are gonna try. I gotta say, these guys don't live up to their name.
Oh, I also love the chugging bass riffs at the end. I'm a sucker for chugging bass. But let's get back to some familiar faces. I mentioned in the covers section that Thrice had a second song in this game, and here it is. Image of the Invisible. Or just Image, as the game calls it. Now, compared to their Minor Threat cover that sounds like it was recorded on an Atari Jaguar, Image of the Invisible is a bit more what I expect from this band. Very polished, but still big in sound. Lyrically, it's your standard rebellious anthem, and it wears that label with pride in everything it does. Rollicking guitar licks that build to a bombastic chorus, Tweedly guitars in the same chorus as one of the many sounds trying to make this as epic sounding as possible. It definitely takes itself more seriously than a number of songs in this game. In some ways, it's kind of an odd one out for this game. This sounds like it belongs in a game about slaying gods, but I guess it can come to play in a skateboarding game too. It would have been easy for this song to turn out cheesy, especially with the other songs surrounding it, but this is handled with care. The screams of "We are the image of the invisible" feel incredible. It pays off its build-ups well, it's lengthy but doesn't feel like it drags. This may be a double dip, but it's with great reason. A little bit of dumb fun, and a little bit of anthemic swagger.
But Thrice isn't the only band to get 2 songs in this game, at least technically. Next up, please welcome Black Flag.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that in addition to getting covered, this game has a Black Flag song straight from the source, Rise Above. Thankfully a much longer song than Fix Me at 2.5 minutes, but who said songs needed to be super long anyway? This is a song I associate more with the DS port Skateland than I do with the main game, and that's mostly due to the production quality. It's that old, sandy tone that just screams 80s punk, but what are you gonna do? I also understand that this is sort of a pioneering song for the band. You hear this and you can probably guess what these guys are about, even by just the chorus. Down with the establishment. We're gonna be in control now. It's not very intricate or deep, but you get it. This is textbook rough and dirty punk, to the point it's almost surprising this didn't make its way into a Tony Hawk game before. But in a game that emphasizes the grit and muck of the underground arguably more than any other Tony Hawk game up to that point, I don't think I'd want it any other way.
And while we're at it, let's check in on Black Flag's current singer, why don't we? Thanks for the warning, I'm going to proceed to not look at you then.
Mike V and the Rats return to us once again for probably the rudest song they've put into a skateboarding game yet, Vendetta. Seriously, I think at this point they're really pushing Mike V as a huge asshole, and that even extends to the game itself, like, more so than usual.
Lighten up, man, I was just gonna— What? Is that a threat? You want to swallow your teeth, punk? And after I wipe the floor with your face, I'm gonna—
I just met you, what's your problem? Yeah, that's off-putting, and I can say the same about the song itself, cause I don't really like it as much as the other Mike V songs from previous games. The opening moments are shrill and jarring.
I've got a vendetta! But I'm still breathing!
Really, I don't think Mike sounds that good throughout most of this. And of course, the central line is, "You see me and you piss yourself."
You see me and you piss yourself!
At this point, I don't know how you could consider this song all that intimidating.
Remember when I said Image of the Invisible could have easily become hard to take seriously? Well, could have ended up like this.
I like a good song about how the narrator wants to beat me up, but this is just silly. It does get some points back for the slower bridge, aside from this line about,
So many people have shit on the floor!
Okay, maybe it's time to stop mentioning bodily waste in this super serious song about how angry you are. There are moments I like about this song. It works fine for the game, but it is not a highlight by any means. Mike's done better before. I need a palate cleanser after that, so next I'm gonna choose Hey 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 by the Riverboat Gamblers. Oh, you think by that name these guys are a southern rock band?
No, you stupid idiot, they're a punk band.
There's not a lot to this one, but man do I love it. Chunky guitar riffs, yelled vocals I can barely understand, apart from that one line about,
Get your courage, go get fucked! Get your armor, go get stuck!
This is how you threaten the listener without sounding like a tryhard, and this is the sort of fun punk that really gets me in a good mood. Like, the chanting of hey 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 is all you really need to get into this. It's clean, it gets in and out in an instant. I don't think there's really much else you need to say about it.
And I think I can say roughly the same thing about most of the rest of the punk songs here, so let's just speed this up a little bit.
We're Gonna Fight by 7 Seconds is another track about a rebel spirit and a call to fight for what's right, complete with a pretty slick bass line. Yeah, if any genre really tickles me pink as a bass player, it's punk. Even if the bass lines themselves are kinda simple. Wild in the Streets by Circle Jerks. Same concept as the last essentially, just with a little cleaner production. Oh, and also this spit in the breakdown.
America.
Don't catch you slipping up. Better Homes and Gardens by SNFU is kinda interesting. Like with Suburban Home, it's not too common to hear punk songs about wanting a common, middle-class life like this.
I'll have you know this is my only goal, to have my house inside the centerfold.
Gardens are not punk. Or at least I thought they weren't, but these guys make them sound punk anyway, and I can respect that. We're Only Gonna Die by Bad Religion, off their first album this time, and you can kinda tell. This one I don't find nearly as memorable as You or Big Bang, but it's fast-paced, and it gets the job done for some good old-fashioned California punk, I guess. Couch Slouch by DRI is a giant piss take. Yeah, every time I hear this one, it's like my mind is floating in a jar. Like, how is the drummer not in immense pain? My favorite thing regarding this song is a comment I found on the YouTube video that simply reads, "What genre is this?" I don't know why I find that so funny, but I do. Borstal Breakout by Sham69 mostly gets my attention for how fun the phrase Borstal Breakout is. What does it mean? I don't know, and I don't care. The song's already plenty jaunty without it. Next up, the casualties make their return. In Underground 2, they had Unknown Soldier about the horrors of war. This year they have Get Off My Back, which is decidedly more immature, like a teenager lashing out at his parents. But when they do it this well, and with this much energy, it's hard to fault. Also, the lead singer continues to have a guttural voice that makes me worry he's gonna lose his ability to speak.
And to finish off this very long discussion of the punk songs in this game, it's time to bring back Tony Hawk veterans Strike Anywhere for a song I think is even better than their previous entry, Question the Answer.
In Underground 1, Strike Anywhere had Refusal, probably the most stressed out punk song I've ever heard. In American Wasteland, they have Question the Answer. In some ways, a much more toned back song, but it's all for the better. It's still intense as hell, with Thomas Barnett's frequent screaming and also the drums so fast they feel like they're slipping off the rest of the song, but I think this won me over a bit more because it has a bit more melody to it, particularly in the rollicking bass line. They let this guy shine on multiple occasions, and yes, I am biased, but this is a stellar example of how much punk can be enhanced by a solid bass line. It and the drums keep the tempo quick and the tensions high, and there's plenty of massive explosions after solid builds. I think this is just as intense as Refusal. Same frantic energy, same bombastic presence, but with a little more variation this time around. This just feels like the California punk that this game has tried to emphasize so far.
Which is impressive because this band is from Virginia.
Also, lyrically, this feels like it fits in with any number of anti-war punk songs. Lines like, "Will you walk the battlefield with me?" or "Wounded by living to fight again, for what?" I thought maybe this might have been written about Iraq, but apparently the song came out in 2000, a little bit before the war. Still, I feel like it would have fit in well with that era of punk, and I'd be surprised if that was something this band wasn't passionate about. Yeah, you tend to come across a number of war protest songs in skating games like these, but I can't say the theme doesn't fit. While the previous song from this band can feel overwhelming for me at times, this one feels just right. Intense enough to make an impact, but commercial enough to appeal to a normie like me. Hopefully these guys are still tearing it up somewhere.
So many punk songs down, and yet we still have a ways to go with the rest of the soundtrack. I think I need a breather. Fortunately, I think this next section will provide us with just that.
There are 9 hip-hop songs in Tony Hawk's American Wasteland. Yes, only 9. Less songs than the total soundtrack for Pro Skater 1. This is sadly a theme that continues into the next few games too. Hip-hop just doesn't get as much love with this series as it used to. I get that they wanted to put more emphasis on rock and punk, but it's a bit depressing how much of an afterthought it is in this game. And since there's so little here, I'll do my best to not half-ass any of these. They're California's hip-hop after all, and they deserve respect.
Hope they like that one of their songs is titled Burn Hollywood Burn.
I'm writing this script during a historic simultaneous writer and actor strike in Hollywood, so right now, I think this song has a bit more catharsis for me. But what else would you expect from Public Enemy? As you'd expect, this song takes the piss out of blaxploitation in Hollywood, exaggerating claims of violence and general idiocy. Big Daddy Kane's verse is especially scathing in that respect. It's like the Confederacy never died, huh? Plus, we can't forget the skit where Flava Flav goes off on a casting agent.
Now we're considering you for a part in our new production. How do you feel about playing a controversial Negro?
Yo, man, what? Bullshit. I'm fighting back.
Thematically, this is an excellent choice for this game. You know, the game where you skate California, including Hollywood.
Wow, I never thought of it like that.
And instrumentally, this is a bit of a quirky one. It's mostly percussion, horns, and even street whistles. A bit of a weird choice, but still effective for Public Enemy's typical rebellious spirit. And really, those samples are pretty catchy. This is what I imagine a gay pride parade sounds like. Everyone is dancing in the streets with colors everywhere, and also giving the middle finger to Hollywood. I've never been to a pride parade, I'm still in the closet. But it wouldn't be the only hip-hop song in this game to have this sort of abrasive style. We also have The End of Biters by Prefuse73. The game calls it One Word Extinguisher. That is not its title, that is the title of the album.
Yeah, God, Activision, don't you know anything?
This is a weird one because it's more of a techno song than a rap song. The rapping only lasts until the 30-second mark of this 80-second track, and it's all a brief sample from Never Ran, Never Will by Sparky D. Yeah, they do a lot of weird mixing with her voice, alright. And that's putting aside the fact that this track is just all-out abrasive. Glitzy synths, it's constantly loud, even the supposedly calmer second half. Yeah, this is about as off-putting as they come, and something about it does fit with the shiny version of California presented in this game, but it can feel so overwhelming to listen to. I do kinda like it, but will fully admit I don't really understand it. It's too short for it to really have a point aside from just being rowdy for the sake of it, but the song it's remixing is neat at least.
But there are other hip-hop songs in this game that have less emphasis on rapping and more emphasis on DJing.
Up next is Duke Curb Crawler by Pest, a 4-minute instrumental that I guess you could consider in a similar vein to Drums of Fire from Thug 2, though it's more of a chill, jazzy, atmospheric track that I heavily associate with the decrepit East LA level, which sounds like an insult, but I really like the vibe. It mostly comes down to how parts of the beat use a delay effect, making notes run on for a bit and creating a drunk sensation. And that's not all it has either. There's so many parts here. There's the bits that sound like church bells, the verse with the dusty sounding piano, the occasional deep pitch-shifted vocals, and an extended part where the synths get glitchy as hell and actually get a good groove going. It's definitely not a song that's gonna leave you bored. I don't think I could even name half the instruments used in this track, but man if it isn't a vibe. And next I want to kick it to a song that's not really an instrumental, but honestly might as well be in my eyes. Organism by Tommy Guerrero. Honestly, I don't know why this is classified as hip-hop and not rock, but I'll roll with it.
After all, this section is already short as it is.
So the reason I say this might as well be an instrumental is because the sung lyrics are so quiet and few and far between. I can't even make out what they are, and googling them gives me multiple sources that say he's saying stuff about not doing marijuana or LSD, but he drinks beer and lives in Nashville. Honest to God, I don't think that's what's being said here, but you be the judge, I guess. Okay, now that I've gotten that off my chest, yeah, this song is a vibe. It's got this real spacey production quality that lets the simple drum pattern really hit hard. The guitars have this bloopy filter that I am absolutely in love with. It's not as experimental as Duke Curb Crawler overall, but it is still as groovy and soothing as they come. Really, it makes me appreciate how chill-out music like this can really fit in with skate culture as much as the more aggressive stuff. Yeah, just cruise down the streets of Beverly Hills or the piers of Santa Monica while this is playing. It really hits. And what makes it more fitting is the fact that Tommy Guerrero was actually a prominent skater in the 80s, so he definitely knows his stuff. He's not a playable character in any game in the series, but I still think his style leaves a great impact on this particular entry, and even the GBA version didn't butcher it. Awesome!
In my opinion, this song barely justifies itself in the hip-hop category, but at least we have a real rap song next that has some pretty chill vibes.
Feeling down downtrodden, fresh kid turned rotten.
What's Up Fat Lip by, Fat Lip. Sum 41 not included. This is a song I find particularly hard to write about, because it's a case where I'm not sure my grievances are all that justified. On one hand, the melancholic tone and the vulnerability Fat Lip displays is admirable, opening up with insecurities about not feeling black enough and about how burnt out he feels. That's all good.
Ain't got no homies that got my back. Yeah, I'm a brother, but sometimes I don't feel black.
And the beat's slick too, thanks to the soothing violins and 808s. Another case where you wouldn't expect a laid-back song like this to fit a skateboarding game all too well, but it just does. Even the chorus is nice thanks to the backing vocals.
Who am I kidding? Who am I fooling when they be like,
What's up, fat lip?
and I say coolin'.
But where I start to have problems is with the second verse.
Going like a sucker almost every day. In the back of your mind, you probably thinking I was gay.
I don't know how I'm supposed to take that line, and none of my interpretations are exactly positive, but my mind primarily goes to stereotypes. The sort of casual homophobia about how gay people are wimpy or overly emotional. Take your pick for which, really. I'm not a fan of either of them. Or, this line could also refer to Fat Lip allegedly hooking up with a trans woman at some point, according to Genius, and judging from the lyrics he wrote for another song, he wasn't exactly enthused about that. I know to some extent I need to acknowledge that this was a different time. The same also applies to the ableist slur he uses that the game doesn't censor for some reason. But for all this song does right prior to that, this verse really takes the wind out of my sails every time I hear it. It kinda makes me not feel all that sorry for him, if I'm honest. And that might seem petty, I get that, but as a trans woman myself, these are the kinds of unfortunate implications that can make certain songs not too desirable for me to revisit.
I feel sad now. So let's try to brighten up the mood by getting turned.
Hands up in the end of your life, so all my fellas in the spot gonna do what they like.
Here's Jukey Skate Rock by LP and Camuto. Not Junkie, Jukey. This is for all intents and purposes a crunk song. Very different from the intellectualism of LP's Phantom and Thug 1, but it is still a banger.
You know Saddam's in the spot tonight, doing it change, and he's feeling all right.
The beat's all spacey and futuristic with plenty of electronic sound effects and gummy G-funk synth lines. Most of the rapping here is done by Camu, at least I assume that's who that is, and he has that unstoppable force of nature energy that I get from Lil Jon or Fat Man Scoop. Rough and rugged, mostly party lyrics, but it is such a fun time regardless. It's full of hooks. Like the one where it's mostly just a shout out to their record label.
You say death, say death,
Or the declaration of World War III for some reason.
World War III's gonna be in the night, so all my ladies in the spot gonna do what they like.
I don't get it, but it sounds cool, so I don't need to get it.
And I don't really understand the middle part either, but I kinda dig it.
You know, yesterday I was down for more. These kids trying to step to me like Death just wasn't doing it.
I don't know if this is still Camu or if it's someone else. It doesn't sound like LP to me. But this fast-talking, borderline unhinged rant about being confronted by kids at a mall is the sort of manic energy that keeps this track from getting too monotonous. Though maybe the outro goes on a little too long. But hey, most people heard this song while skating around a giant oil rig anyway, so it's not a big deal. Alright, next up we have another familiar face, Del the Funky Homo Sapien, here with the Hieroglyphics collab, Burnt. At this point, Del's a veteran of the Tony Hawk games, and it's always a joy to see him. This one doesn't really have a joke or a hook compared to other Del songs we've talked about. It's just a posse cut with an old school vibe and a synth line that changes every few verses. But it scratches an itch. Or in this case, I guess burns off a patch of your skin where the itch was. Too much.
I respond with detour distraction when I see one better than rerun, so what's happening?
The rhymes are pretty standard, but fun and lighthearted across the board. The one that stands out the most to me comes from Tajai in the third verse. This is kinda humorous. I don't think it's really that offensive, just mostly acknowledging gay men might have butt sex.
Really, as a rapper, saying you're like a homosexual is kind of a power move. At least in this context.
People call me soup just because I'm living fat. People call me nasty, it's because I eat the cat.
I don't know who the hieroglyphics are, but they seem like fun, and they mesh well with Dell's goofy style. And some of their deliveries remind me a lot of earlier period Eminem.
Might I be the greater innovator of the rhyme scheme? My style is the rising to get your eyes opening.
And even Fat Albert, if you can believe it.
So you better get flows to counteract what we've done. Receive one gun, cause I'm armed like a sleeve, son.
It's not as overtly goofy as other Dell tracks I've covered in this series, but it still has a charm all its own. Penultimately, we have Sniper Picnic by Rob Sonic, Creature, and Hangar 18. Yes, there was a rap group that shared its name with a Megadeth song in the 2000s.
And now I'm disappointed that Megadeth never got featured in a Tony Hawk game.
One-way innocence, two-way radio, gateway druggy with the rundown ratio.
Rob Sonic is a producer and rapper, so this song is basically all him, and the beat he chose gives me a similar feeling to Duke Curb Crawler, even though it's not an instrumental, and it's a lot more bassy. Almost like a tugboat horn. Love me some chill-sounding rap. I don't really have much to say about the actual rappers here. Everyone sounds the part, but the way Creature ends his verse is pretty memorable.
Kurt Mayfield or Kurt Cobain, the boy heroin. Need to squirt him in your veins.
I don't know what he's going for, shock value or comparing himself to the guy, but it definitely got my attention either way, especially with that heroin mention, oh boy. Song still slaps anyway, so I'm fine with it.
But now we have to move on to the final hip-hop song of the game, and my personal favorite of the set, Put Your Quarter Up by Mole Men.
This is a producer track teaming up 3 rappers who have all made appearances on the Tony Hawk series before: Slug, Aesop Rock, and MF Doom. And it's an interesting one. These are 3 very different rappers who I each appreciate a lot, and their unifying theme is an arcade motif. And it's almost what I think Game Over by Lil Flip, a big hit that came out a couple years after this song, should have been, mostly in having a less irritating beat. These sound like video game sound effects, but arranged to make it sound futuristic and badass. The perfect thing to rap over. And there's some video game references, but not too many that it gets corny. Slug only has a couple in his verse.
From the Galaga bugs to the amateur thugs.
It's the kind of verse I expect from Slug from other songs. Borderline cocky dick with clever boasts. I think there are plenty of memorable lines here, like his reference to Superman and his play on words with coin names.
I run the game of plenty. I buy my nickels from a dime that goes by the name of Penny.
Solid beginning to the song. And of course, you get Aesop Rock on a song and he's gonna do stuff like this.
Would've said count me in, but just couldn't afford the bounty. I'm through the deep myself before the second leaping sheep even got counted.
Even on a song with a premise as simple as video games, dude can't help but show off. And in typical rock fashion, I have no clue what he's saying, but he kinda runs away with the song. It's verbose and nerdy and technically impressive. I mean, who else tries to sneak in a Great Gatsby reference out of nowhere?
Jay Gatsby the Great Bastion, open the plastic backspins.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's almost a shame he was put right in the middle.
But MF Doom has something else in mind to end off this song.
With more rhymes and germs, a spitball carry as it fly through the air like Pitfall Harry.
Doom, I think, is the one who best understood the assignment here. His verse here is chock full of video game references, from Pitfall to Centipede, Spy Hunter,
It switched like Spy Hunter once he to the speedboat.
and from what I know of him, this seems in character. Goofball personality who probably had an affinity for many of these games, and they're all coin-op cabinets even non-gamers could probably recognize, and they fit the repeated mantra of put your quarter up. It's kinda corny, but Doom pulls it off so well. And even if there's not that many other references in the other verses, I do like that title as it relates to the structure. The They each pass off a verse, they start off their verses with that phrase.
Put your quarter up. I got first.
Put your quarter up, brother.
Yo, I go next. Put your quarter up.
They each have something different to say, and they each leave an impression in their own way. Plus, I don't think I need to point out how perfect it is that this appeared in a video game soundtrack, one with arcadey mechanics and gameplay. Again, Lil Flip half-assed a similar concept, but these guys make the most of it.
And that is how you pander to a nerd like me. Well, that section was short, wasn't it? So let's get on the home stretch and discuss the last 25 songs in this game.
There's a lot of variety in the rock section of this soundtrack. Of course, you have your typical metal and stoner rock in this game, but there's also some songs with a bit more glitz and glamour to fit the Hollywood aesthetic. A few of these songs I couldn't really see being used in past games, and yet they still fit like a glove here. Okay, bad example. I'm not gonna say the soundtrack goes full bubblegum or K-pop in this section. This isn't Tony Hawk Band Hero, but if you never imagined acts like Scissor Sisters, The Bravery, or Oingo Boingo to be used in a skateboarding game, well, you just lost a bet. But we'll ease into that stuff. There's still plenty of heavy stuff alongside the more mainstream offerings.
And our first subject is one I think fits into both categories. Holiday by Green Day.
In these videos, I often find myself talking about music that I don't think anyone else has ever heard of. Well, you know this song. A big chart hit from one of the biggest rock albums of the 2000s, and one of my personal favorite albums of all time. It feels unusual for a song this mainstream to be in a Tony Hawk game, at least during the period when it would have been a big hit. But when you consider how fiercely political and anti-war this song is, it starts to make sense. This is still as explosive and catchy as it was when it was new. Simple riffs with a lot of power that might not be as fast as Green Day did them back with Dookie, but it still sounds so satisfying.
Plus, like California Uber Alleys, it mocks a Californian politician.
On the bridge, Billy Joe Armstrong takes on the role of a war-hungry governor to really drive home his disdain for authoritarian control. A great section for its unsettling drum and bass progression, with the elephant in the room being a homophobic slur Billy uses, that the game doesn't censor. Usually the Tony Hawk games silence this word, so it's unusual for it to be allowed here, but at the very least, this is used more to mock politicians with this mindset, rather than the group this word is usually meant to hurt. But even with that moment, this is still an incredible bridge. Though sadly on Skateland, the song ends right before this part. There's those pesky cartridge limitations kicking in again. This is the kind of venomous song that played right into Green Day's strengths. Might as well be the centerpiece track of the band's most political album to date, and yet I could probably name half a dozen tracks on the album that I enjoy even more. It's that good.
But now that we're done talking about Green Day, let's talk about Green Day.
Now I know what you're thinking. Cicabeot, that song credit in the top left doesn't say Green Day, it says The Network. Well, let me blow your mind. This band is just Green Day with a different name. Granted, at the time, this was a poorly kept secret that took until 2013 for Mike Dirnt to actually admit. But like, come on. This is clearly Billy Joe Armstrong singing, it's Green Day. I guess maybe this band was their way of blowing off steam and making stuff they wouldn't ordinarily make for a little bit, like an electro-adjacent cover of a Misfits song. This is a neat addition to this game. It doesn't feel too redundant from either the other Green Day song or the other Misfits cover. It's more synth punk than pop punk with sinister overtones to go with the theme of aliens. The verses are these edgelord, we are going to destroy your puny planet musings that sound pretty intimidating if a little silly. And then the chorus of we don't care sounds a lot more lighthearted. The sort of thing that makes Alien Annihilation sound not all that bad after all. It sounds really cool. In a time where Green Day's music was getting a lot more serious and political, I can see why this would scratch a certain itch for people who just want to hear these guys sing about nonsense again, even if it is a cover.
Between this and the release of the game Destroy All Humans, 2005 was a really good year for aliens coming down to Earth and killing everybody.
And for another recognizable act, next we have Peace Frog by The Doors. We previously saw this band with Break On Through and Thug 2.
Rhyming.
And now we have their ironically named song where most of the lines are about blood in certain contexts. Usually in relation to violence, including that which is racially motivated, but also related to menstruation and abortion, I guess. I'd be surprised if this song wasn't controversial back in 1970. I like this song a lot. I always thought the title was sort of fitting, if only for the snappy guitar riff. This is music I think should accompany footage of frogs hopping. Frogs are adorable, aren't they? I'm of course also a sucker for a groovy bass line like this, and the organs are the same psychedelic outfit as they usually are in Doors songs, but this might be my favorite use of them for how they finish off the guitar's melody. If it weren't for the repeated shouts of blood in the streets, you'd almost be tricked into thinking this was a happy song. Plus, the bridge and guitar solo are great. It's an old song that still manages to work really well for a 2000 skateboarding game, and that's an accomplishment to be proud of for a non-punk song. Though, I guess you could argue Jim Morrison was a punk in his own right.
So Thaw meets its 70s psychedelic quota, but what about its 80s new wave quota?
I don't know that much about Oingo Boingo, but they've got some weird, fun bangers. You hear Danny Elfman, the guy behind the Simpsons theme, leading a rock band, and you don't want to believe it, and then you hear what that band made, and it starts to click. Ska is a perfect fit for Tony Hawk's version of California, to the point I wish there was even more of it. But in the absence of Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Sublime, or Real Big Fish, we have Oingo Boingo's Who Do You Want to Be, where Danny Elfman considers wearing drag. You can tell it was scandalous even back then from how demented he sounds saying this.
And to think Republicans are still clutching pearls over it in the 2020s.
Love the energetic horns, love the driving guitar, especially in this version of the song. The organs especially make this feel wacky and zany. A little levity that's needed after a guy aims a rocket launcher at construction workers in broad daylight. These are the Tony Hawk songs that tend to stand out the most for me. The off-the-wall insane stuff that matches the tone of the series, while still being heavy enough to skate to.
Anyway, here's the exact opposite of that. An intricately crafted progressive rock instrumental. Are those really exact opposites? Who cares?
And then the sporadic are amazing. There, I said it. I've loved them ever since I discovered their music through the Guitar Hero series, and I was elated to find out that they had a song in Tony Hawk as well. This is Son of Pearl, and I love it just as much as the Guitar Hero songs like Impulse, Anything, and the Triangular Race Through Space. Though it does feel a bit less aggressive than normal, probably owing to putting more emphasis on keys than on guitars in certain sections. There's still plenty of intense moments, especially the main guitar riff, but mostly, this is just a beautiful song. The more bombastic moments contrast well with the more mellow moments. For example, there's this calming piano section 2.5 minutes in, and then gradually the rest of the instruments increase in presence, until we get a guitar solo that transitions into this chaotic, stressful passage. Their songs can often sound like multiple songs in one, and they do it as well as possible. Also, I have to give special props to how insane the drumming is in and the sporadic overall. Feels so complex and mind-blowing that act as perfect transitional pieces. And what makes it even cooler is that the drummer is a Neversoft and Vicarious Visions employee, specifically Andy Thups, who's even a YouTuber and streamer in the current day. Yeah, this guy definitely gets around, had at least some part in creating these games, and years later, he's continued to make a name for himself with them.
Also, he's the reason the song Anything is so hard on drums in the Guitar Hero series. I don't know if I should be impressed or angry with him about that.
Next is another instrumental, Rawhide by Nassim, possibly loosely based on the old Western song of the same name. You know, the one that goes rollin', rollin', rollin'. I mean, I guess the opening organ riff sounds a little similar. But mostly, this seems to be its own thing. In fact, I might argue it's one of the most quintessential rock songs in American Wasteland. It's in Skateland for one, and it's a simple yet catchy tune that just fits perfectly with the game's aesthetic. Those synthy organs are on point. Otherwise, the song's pretty simple. It's got satisfying chugging guitar riffs, and that's about it. Oh, and also the bass solo, as brief as it is. It's pretty short and a pretty standard walking pattern. Think the bass solo in Brown Eyed Girl, but applied to a skateboarding song. Though really, I think I'd love to hear this song in just about any sporting event, like the song they play in a stadium in between the action. There's not much to it, but it is really effective in pumping you up for some friendly competition.
And I guess I should throw in the last pseudo-instrumental in this game.
You can take some of what I said about Rawhide and apply it to Champ by Breakestra. Same kind of organ tone, it's simple and short, though this time there's the occasional cheers of Champ. And of course it has a little more focus on horns compared to guitar. Still some cool bass work though. Yeah, this one's nice and funky. Not quite as energetic as the last song, but it perfectly fits the atmosphere. Nice and chill. But it's only a minute and a half long, so there's not much time for it to really get going. And some of the YouTube uploads just have it end abruptly, even though it ends in a fade out in the game. Kinda makes me wonder if there's a more complete version of this song out there, but that's all we get for the game version.
Such are the pitfalls with reviewing music that no one's really heard of outside of niche cases like these.
But do you know what you have heard of? Motley Crue. And here in American Wasteland, we have their debut single, Livewire. Or second after debut? Wikipedia, please explain this. This fits so perfectly in this game that it almost makes me wonder why this band wasn't in a Tony Hawk game before this one. Though maybe a glam metal song like this fits more in Wasteland than just about any prior entry. I am not as familiar with this track as I am with stuff like Shout at the Devil, Smoking in the Boys' Room, or Dr. Feelgood, but that might be a good thing for a skating game, getting lesser-known cuts to some extent, and it's definitely got the attitude I look for in both Crew and Hawk. Get out of the way, because I'm a maniac and I am wrecking absolutely everything. I mean, you do destroy stuff like dinosaur statues, gas station signs, and even sidewalks for some reason, so fair play. Plus, there's the energetic and chunky riffs that make you feel like going just about as fast as possible.
Yeah, you can tell that pretty much all of the DNA for this band was present pretty much from the start. Live fast, die young, do all the drugs. It's mindless, I know, but it's still a lot of fun.
I do feel like it's missing a guitar solo though. Instead it opts for a slower bridge, but that's really a nitpick. In a soundtrack filled with flashy rock and punk, a band like Crew was pretty much a must, and they chose a good cut for it.
But I hear you saying, Cicabeot, this soundtrack isn't gay enough. Where are the really gay songs? Well, my friend, I've got you covered.
Filthy Gorgeous by Scissor Sisters is one of the strangest songs to be in a Tony Hawk game. I don't think this would have fit that well in any game before or after, cause it really is more of a pop song. But for this game, it's just about perfect. I primarily knew about this song because CS188 would often use it as a punchline for his YTPs, because it's a synth-heavy song about sex, how could he stay away? And what a way to be introduced to this weird-ass song, and then later find out it's in a skateboarding game. I love this song so much. It's funny as hell, not just for the colorful, sexually explicit imagery, but because the singer's falsetto is kinda comical. It's cheesy in a way you don't typically hear on a professional record. This is a guy who knows he's being kinda creepy, but is still so confident that his style is working for this girl.
And I like to think that it actually is working, too.
This is the kind of stuff you don't say unless everyone's already comfortable with things getting a little naughty. Maybe everyone's into a bit of roleplay or just saying things to get in the mood. That's what keeps this from going too far for me. And also imagining the singer is saying all this in drag. That's what this falsetto puts into my mind. Oh, and I can't ignore how damn funky this song is. Wonderfully bloopy synths that are the cornerstone of this song. The main reason it works so well for this game. This would be borderline disco if it weren't for the rugged guitars in the chorus. Yeah, this works for me. As does the auto-tuned bridge. Again, hilarious. Even if the hookup in the lyrics is most likely hetero, it still feels gay as hell, in the flashy, Pride Month colors sort of way. Which is fitting because Scissor Sisters' YouTube icon is still rocking Pride colors, even at the time of writing this in August. So yeah, this song is gay. Don't like it? Then you probably don't belong on my channel.
Remember, folks, every month is Pride Month.
And I should probably be free to move on to another mostly pop band with The Bravery. Their song Unconditional is here, though this is a song I always associated more with Guitar Hero On Tour modern hits. But I do love this song, so I'm always happy to see it in more places. This is a sort of Killers-adjacent indie pop rock joint, so I wouldn't consider it obvious for inclusion in a skating game, but I do think it kinda fits in with this particular game's narrative. Your character starts as a runaway and is prone to bullying pretty much immediately when he arrives in Hollywood, and the lyrics here deal with desperation for acceptance and love, even though he feels like he needs to earn it. Much like how you need to earn respect through performing well in skate competitions and shooting water balloons at elderly women.
Yeah, if you couldn't tell, this game has some weird set pieces.
It's kind of tenuous, but a connection is there, at least for me. Plus, I just love the happy atmosphere, especially the fast tremolo picking in the guitar solo. Again, perfect glitz and glamour for a game like Wasteland. I'd argue there's not much else like it in the soundtrack, but it's very welcome. The only thing that might come close to a similar feel here is maybe Like Eating Glass by Block Party. Feels like it's been a long time since I've used this word, but this is so transcendent. It's built around the light reverb of the guitars with plenty of fast picking that gives a good floating through the air vibe. It's very pretty. But the real stars of the show here are the drums. The drummer goes nuts all throughout this. Frantic sticking and fast rolls over the snares and toms that make this feel almost like a glorified drum solo. I guess frantic drumming is a bit of a signature for Block Party, but I don't think I've heard a song of theirs that was this insane, with new fills seemingly every few seconds. Even the parts where they take a break feel notable, gives you time to breathe and take in just how otherworldly this song is.
But of course, I'm not really much of a drummer myself, which is why it's a good thing that the bass in this song is just as mesmerizing.
Though bass is not used in absolutely every moment here, I love the way it grooves and does its own thing against the madness. This could have gotten away with the bass just playing the occasional anchor notes to support the guitars, but instead it ends up having more interesting rhythms than the guitars, giving this a real body and flow that shows what makes this band so special. What I'm saying is this song really deserved to make it into a Guitar Hero or Rock Band game. It would have been a lot of fun. And of course, depressing lyrics. Those almost feel like a necessity for this kind of song. Yeah, for a song to sound this happy, it feels right for the tone to be contradictory. Don't eat glass, okay?
And don't drink poison either, of course. Actually, you know what? Just don't die.
Quick interjection, but I didn't want to forget about this one, Penalty Box by Bobot Adrenaline, which is in contention for the jolliest song in this game, which of course means, say it with me, it's an angry song. Yeah, it's anger management hour here. You know someone means business when they have the nerve to say bollocks to you. I don't know, I think it's kind of funny. I like how this sounds, in part because it reminds me of hockey for some reason. I mean, I guess the lyrics could be about hockey, except for this line. Or maybe I'm just not up on my hockey terminology, but mostly it kinda reminds me of this hockey-themed rock band I would listen to a lot as a kid called the Zambonis. They made comedy songs about hockey, and they were awesome. Of course, I don't want to get on too much of a tangent, so I'll make this quick. If you want a good idea of what these guys were about, check out the songs I Wanna Drive the Zamboni, Hockey Monkey, or Johnny Got Suspended. But yeah, Penalty Box is nice and ironically cheery. Nice to balance things out in LA. Which leads us to our next mini category, songs that are explicitly about Los Angeles. One of them is simply titled Los Angeles by Frank Black of Pixies, and it has no relation to the song by X from the last game. Well, it's not exactly like the Pixies songs I'm familiar with. Definitely a lot more heavy guitars and shouty vocals, though I guess it still comes off as complete nonsense like a good number of Pixies songs. Really, I thought this would be the kind of song to be critical of LA, though it mostly comes off as unintelligible riffing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Really, this is a generally pleasant tune that you're bound to hear a lot when you play this game, particularly with the DS version, and hopefully I don't need to explain why this is a perfect fit for Wasteland, or any game taking place in California. It was almost a requirement for the devs to include a song with this exact title. I don't think there's much to say here, but the other LA-based song is another thing entirely. Now, this is the synth cheese I admire. Everyone is Someone in LA by Felix da Housecat is the kind of song I imagine goes through your mind when you eat too many gummy worms, then chase it down with Mountain Dew laced with cocaine. It is so extra in its sound, its style. Really, the lyrics give off a strong live fast, die young vibe that feels oh so right. It's just as good a skateboarding song as it is a driving song.
And if you think about it, those two types of songs go hand in hand pretty often.
It's also kind of funny that this has such an opposite vibe from the last LA song. That one felt very cynical and sarcastic, while this feels more positive and genuine. If you can make it in LA, you can make it anywhere, right? Yeah, that's a good mindset to have, even if it's not entirely realistic. But that's the vibe a goofy song like this should be giving off, with the sugary synths and the huge distorted guitars. This is always a joy to hear, whether in-game or in my car. Another centerpiece of this soundtrack.
But if you ask me, I think that another song in a similar vein does it just a bit better.
I am absolutely in love with I Disappear by The Faint. And yes, it's because the bass is stellar, how did you know? It's almost like I've brought that instrument up a lot in this video. The Faint strike me as a very quirky, experimental band, primarily new wave, but also plenty of dance punk. The couple of songs I've heard from them are the kinds that suck me into another world, one where logic and control don't exist. Borderline inane lyrics and the weirdest sounds and instrument combinations you can think of, but it just works anyway. And like I mentioned earlier, in this case, there's some of the grooviest bass lines you can possibly think of, including this octave work in the verses that's a lot harder to play than it sounds. It really sounds fantastic too, loud and crunchy the whole way through. It's not as intricate as a Primus song or anything, but I'll always give respect to an act that can make lead bass work this well. But possibly my favorite part of the song is this bridge, which starts with somber vocals, then kicks it into high gear with tense staccato notes and later some revved up guitars. This is magical. It almost feels wrong that this song isn't more recognized. It has everything you could want in a song. Creepy lyrics, chunky bass, what more could you need?
I mean, I guess you might want metal, and as usual, this game has that in spades.
Admittedly, the metal in this game is a bit out of my range. It is generally really brutal, like a number of choice cuts from Thug 1, but that doesn't mean there aren't a couple that don't tickle my fancy, such as I Like Dirt. Yes, that's the name of a song in this game.
I like dirt, and dirt likes me.
So the band The Thunderlords exists for one very specific reason, to make metal for children. The band's made up of Alan Flores and his daughter Maya, who was no older than 5 at the time this song was made. And there is something kinda wholesome about taking metal, which is generally super inappropriate for children, and making silly songs in that genre for children. Their song, I Like Dirt, is about the all-important topic everyone goes through at some point in their lives, playing in dirt. Yeah, it's about time someone stepped up to our nasty parents that tell us to get clean and take a bath when we get dirty. We will play in dirt for as long as it takes, at least until we get too tired to continue to play in dirt.
A day which will never come!
I'll go outside and play with dirt again.
Yeah, I'm not the intended audience for this song, but I still get a kick out of this being in the game. In all its simple riffs and childish lyrics, I think it's still cute. Definitely better than some other children's music I've heard in my day, like Kids Bop. But if this isn't your thing, thankfully there's some more intense metal to consume here, like Warlord by Lair of the Minotaur, which grabs my attention pretty much immediately with this guttural scream. And from here on out, it never lets up. This is as brutal as they come, and while I normally wouldn't be down for that, this gets my blood pumping in the best ways. The guitars actually have some groove to them, which does a lot to help me connect with death metal. Plus, it's nice that they thought to break up the blast beats. Those are important, but so is having some slower, gloomier moments to really build and earn the intensity of those blast beats. Also, gotta respect the vocalist for putting his all into every scream. He's probably covered with a ton of effects, but I don't mind at all, mostly because I ain't a purist. In fact, I'm an outsider.
And since I don't really have that much to say about the rest of the metal songs in this game, let's kick it into another rapid-fire round.
High on Fire returned for Wasteland with Devolution. This one doesn't do it for me quite as well as Hung, Drawn, and Quartered from Thug, but this is still appropriately dark and gloomy. Plus, you need a good song to invoke images of the fires of hell covering the planet. Dove-Tongued Aggressor by Spirit Caravan is our token stoner rock song for this game, though maybe in this case it's a little too slow for my liking. Still nice and crunchy, but not really as engaging as some of the choice cuts from Thug 1, especially Impetus. Live Near Death by USSR. Now, our singer here does this sort of half-growl vocal style, one that still sounds human, but is still crackly and intimidating. You know the one, like a Gollum voice. I can appreciate the brutality as always, but it's not one of my favorites. Grave Dancer by Pig Destroyer is a little bit of grindcore to brighten up your day, complete with vocals that have the echo effect pushed up all the way. This is fine, but maybe a little bit too much for me, though it is short, even though it ends with 1¼ minutes of this. So I guess this is, the behind-the-scenes look at a ritual sacrifice. This part isn't in the game, by the way, for obvious reasons, but it is weird as hell, and what made me remember this song in the first place. Ung by Skate Africana isn't exactly metal, more an African-inspired dance punk song with a pretty slick bass line. Definitely helps it stand out against some of the other heavier songs in this game, though it's not one I really remember popping up that much in this game. Pretty cool though. Iron Tusk by Mastodon. Again, I've never really been that interested in this band, and this doesn't do that much for me. I guess some of the riffs are kinda cool, but mostly this is just excess. Loud shouting and overdone guitars and drums, something that's often a problem with me when it comes to Mastodon songs. Black Metal by Venom gives us a break from the shouting and gives us a nice, wholesome satanic ritual, I assume. Yeah, after so much death metal and grindcore, a good old-fashioned thrash metal song is a decent palate cleanser, even if it sounds like this was recorded in a big room with a lot of echo.
And for the very last song in the game, we turn away from metal once and for all to discuss a little dance punk oddball. Little Girl by Death from Above 1979.
Death from Above 1979 is a unique band. It's made of just two people. One person does bass and some synths, and the other drums and sings. There aren't a lot of bands out there where the drummer performs lead vocals, but it is a cool setup. And this song in particular is really interesting. Of course, as a bassist, this scratches an itch for me thanks to its sound depending heavily on the bass and not guitar. Some pretty intricate playing as well, even though, again, it's nowhere near Les Claypool's level. But Jesse Keeler is still full of fun tremolo parts and plenty of slap bits too. No lead guitar needed. This sounds great on its own. Everything this song does is full of pulsing swagger. Even the parts where the bass is playing one note are badass. The lyrics are complete nonsense, but they feel so primal screamed over this track.
It's the kind of delivery where it becomes very obvious that the singer also plays drums, because his voice is basically like pounding toms here.
This song is a force of nature, loud and abrasive in all the right ways, and confident the whole way through. And despite the lack of guitar, it sounds very full. I guess the synths do help, but they're only really prominent in the outro. Mostly, I'm just in awe of the creativity on display. I'm really only familiar with one other song from this band, Trainwreck 1979, but I can tell I'd get a lot out of them if I dug deeper. Plus, this track plays during the game demo, so they knew how good it was for this game. Glitzy, powerful, and kinda hilarious. This is everything Tony Hawk's American Wasteland represents. This is a defining tune of this game for me, and maybe it's up in the air if it's my favorite or not, but damn do I love it.
So that's all that I have have for you for now. Another long journey through obscure licensed video game music is complete. And as far as that goes, yeah, this series has still got it.
Though I do have some problems with this entry coming off the Underground titles, the soundtrack quality is definitely still there for me. I love the execution of the cover songs for the most part, and there's plenty of original tracks too that really make this game feel like its own thing. It's a bit more focused in that glamorous California style from nearly all angles, and while it could have used some more hip-hop, every genre has some strong and sometimes weird offerings. Now again, I don't think this quite lives up to some of the earlier titles. Flips 2 and 3 are still so strong, and I don't think they were ever topped, despite their small size. But this game still made a case for itself with its style and variety. I spent a good chunk of last year listening to a bunch of these, and that was time well spent. And we'll be back next year to look at a certain racing spin-off, but for now, I think I need to work on something that isn't feature-length.
I'm Cicabeot1, I've still never ridden a skateboard in my life, and take care.